Greetings and welcome, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, to this video. I don't know what I'm going to call it, but basically, Steam Next Fest is happening right now. We've just had not E3 adjacent, with all of the cool gameplay trailers and reveals and a few shocks here and there. But now it's time for Steam Next Fest, which means that there are hundreds of demos on Steam, and I have downloaded a bunch of them, and I'm going to play who knows how many. I'm going to play a ton of them. I don't know. I'm recording this bit first. Before I record all the other stuff, so I haven't actually played any demos yet. But the basic premise of this video is I'm going to play as many demos as I can over the next couple of days, and then, like, after I finish each demo, I'm going to hit record on the microphone, and I'm just going to talk about whatever I've just played, like, so you get my, like, raw thoughts from, like, literally, I'm going to close the game down, I'm going to hit record on OBS, and then I'm going to start talking, and we'll see what comes out. How many demos I'm going to play? I don't know, like, I want to get this video out, like, probably about Wednesday or Thursday, just, like, so that Steam Next Fest is still happening when this video comes out, so, like, if anything looks or sounds like it might be for you, like, you can go and download it on Steam. The demo will be available all week. And also, a little bit because Neon White comes out on Thursday, and I'll probably start playing demos on Thursday, because I'll be playing Neon White, but mostly the kind thing that I'm doing, so you can go and play these demos for yourself. Not all the demos I play will necessarily be from Steam Next Fest. Like, I have a folder on Steam, on my Steam library, which is full of demos, and I've downloaded a bunch of demos from Steam Next Fest, but it's also got a bunch of other demos in that I've been meaning to check out, and I'm literally just going through that folder, picking some stuff out that looks like it might be interesting, and I'm going to play it. So some of these demos might not necessarily be tied to Steam Next Fest. Some of them might just be demos that you can download on Steam anyway for cool-looking indie games that I'm looking forward to. So, you know, like, some of the demos, like, even if you get this video, like, a month or 2 months after I publish it, maybe you can even play some of these demos. Hell, you might be able to play some of these games. But that's enough of an intro from me, because I know you want to hear me and see me talk about some cool indie games that I'm playing. So I'm just going to stop talking now and let Future Amy do her thing. Take it, Future Amy. So I just finished playing my first demo of Steam Next Fest. It's actually not a Steam Next Fest demo. It came out a few days ago. But the reason it's my first demo, it's Metal Hellsinger, and I picked this one first because I've seen a few people on my timeline get absolutely obsessed with this demo, and I had to see what the crack was with it. Like, it was already a game that I'd heard of, and it was already a game that I looked forward to, because basically Metal Hellsinger is a first-person shooter that is also a rhythm game set in hell. Like, the level that I played through looks like it came straight out of a heavy metal cover, like a heavy metal album cover, and you fight demons, and you've got guns, and you're shooting to the beat, and you're reloading to the beat, and there's some seriously awesome heavy metal blasting away in the background. Oh my god, I still have, like, I played for like 30 minutes, and I still have, like, the adrenaline from playing the game just surging through me. Like, I want to go out and start punching walls or something. Like, I feel powerful after playing it. It's an incredible game. At least the 30 minutes that I played, it absolutely just draws you in with the music and the pounding of the drums, like, and you just zen. It's like a zen game, which I know is a weird thing to say, considering, you know, it's a heavy metal game with heavy metal music in the background, but, like, you just enter this space of, like, this headspace of, like, absolute zen, where you're just one with the beat of this awesome metal music. It's great to just fucking rock out to this cool music and shoot demons, blasting them, like, and there's so many cool little mechanics and little touches, like the torches, like, flare to the beat of the music, and you've got the little indicator on your screen, so, like, when you lose the beat, like I did a few times, like, you can get it back by looking at the what the hell is it called? The reticle, that's it. The reticle on your screen, just, like, get it back because it's pulsing with the beat of the music. You'll be able to see it on the footage. You shoot to the beat. It's got an active reload system where you can reload faster if you reload to the beat, because your normal guns have, like, bullets you need to reload. You can stun enemies if you do enough damage to them, and then you do a glory kill by pressing E, but you do that to the beat as well. Like, if you push E when you're not doing it to the beat, nothing happens. And, like, you can shoot enemies, like, you know, off the beat if you really want, but, like, you do way more damage if you hit them on the beat, and you just, like, I thought I missed a lot of shots when I played this game, like, a lot of shots from the beat, but then, like, you get the screen at the end of the level after I beat the end boss, which was awesome, by the way. Oh my god, the end boss was so good. And it said I hit 91% of my shots to the beat, so I actually did pretty well. And I'm not a rhythmic person in any way, but, like, it's metal, man. Like, you start headbanging to the drum beat, and that's that's what you start doing with your finger on the mouse as well. You just start clicking like your head banging. And like the next thing you know, like 30 minutes has gone by in a blink of an eye and you want more, but you can't have more because it's just a demo and the game doesn't come out until September 15th. This was awesome. It was an awesome demo. I can't wait to play the full game. It's coming out in a couple of months, so I don't have to wait too long, thankfully. And it was just a great way to start like all of these demos from Steam Next Fest. And I can't wait to play more of this game, but also to play more of some other games. Like I'm gonna keep recording these right after I finish playing each demo. So like you're getting my fresh, raw thoughts from me just literally closing the game down and hitting record. So yeah, I guess take it away, future Amy. Okay, so for our next game, I thought I'd change things up completely from a pulse-pounding, heavy metal rhythm shooter through hell killing demons game to play The Cub, which is a story-driven, post-apocalyptic platformer. The ability is the Jungle Book meets Armageddon. So they also talk about it on the Steam Store page as being difficult, like it's the number one user-defined tag for the game, and they mention it in the description, saying it's an old-school tough platformer inspired by Sega classics, but built for today. And like, there's a lot I really love about this game. I think the art style is really cool. I think the concept is fantastic. Like, the world looks so great. You're on post-apocalyptic Earth, like everybody who had money, I guess, like fucked off to Mars in rockets, but now they're back and they're basically being dicks, and you play a kid who was left behind after the rockets launched, and you were raised by wolves in this post-apocalyptic environment, and you found a helmet from a Martian, like all the humans who went to Mars call themselves Martians, I guess, and, you know, it tunes into Radio Mars or whatever, and so, you know, the kid, the cub, I guess, is the titular, like, title character, like, relearned English. I'm assuming the default language is English. Might not be. But, you know, he relearned English based on, like, listening to this radio. And as he's being hunted by the Martians who have come down in their rocket ships with their jetpacks and their guns and weapons and traps and whatnot, like, he's got to survive through this world. As well as, like, survive, like, mutated creatures and whatnot. There's, like, crocodiles in the water and, like, boars with spikes. And there's just spikes everywhere. So the aesthetic, the premise, and the story are really cool. The soundtrack that plays through this radio station is exceptional. Like, I played, like, 3 short snippets of levels. I don't know if they were 3 full levels, but they were definitely, like, 3 separate entities as part of the demo. And, like, the music that accompanies the gameplay is just fantastic. And also is the radio station itself. Like, you get some really funny digs at like the modern day, like, because I mean, the Cub isn't that far fetched when you think about the fact that we are destroying the planet that we live on. But the gameplay, like, it builds itself as being tough. So like, dying is probably a part of it. You know, like, there's a lot of trial and error to it, and like figuring out how to do stuff. But like, that difficulty is amplified by the fact that the controls aren't quite there yet. Like, it says in the top corner of the screen, game in development. So, you know, it's not a finished product. So, you know, when I say the controls are really fiddly and inconsistent, what I'm talking about there is like, for now, like, they could polish this game up so that when it comes out, it feels really fluid. But right now, it doesn't feel really fluid. Like, there are sections of this game, like, there's a part where you've got to, like, quickly scurry up a plane or a train or something as it's falling. So you've got a certain amount of time to climb up each car before it falls and drops. And it was just really difficult to actually get the character to do what I needed them to do. Like, and you spend that part was in the 3rd level. You spend the first 2 levels jumping between, like, clearly signposted platforms. So, like, everything that you can generally climb on is, like, highlighted, like, with this blue stuff. I don't know, stuff is the best word. It's what I'm going with. And, like, to climb up this plane, it took me a few goes to realize how I was supposed to actually climb up it, because the things that I was supposed to grab weren't highlighted in blue. They were just normal concrete gray. And even then, like, as I was climbing up this one specific part of the level, like, some of the bits that were jutting out were parts that I could grab, and some of them weren't. Like, it was very difficult to read in that one moment. And there were other parts throughout the demo where I feel like the controls weren't quite up to scratch to let me do what the game wanted me to do. But there's a lot of promise and potential here, and this is a demo for a game in development, so there's plenty of time for the developers to polish it up, to tune the controls, to make it feel just a little bit more fluid, which is what I think the game really needs. It's just that fluidity that it's missing. Everything else about the cub that I played in this demo, it was about 30 minutes long, was really, really good and really polished, and I enjoyed a lot of it, but the thing that I've got a problem with is obviously the main part of the game. So hopefully that will get tuned up as time goes on, as the development goes on, and when the cub finally comes out, like it'll be good. It'll feel really fluid and really fast paced and still tough, and I'll probably still die a bunch, but like right now when I'm dying, I feel like it's not necessarily my fault so much as it is the game's fault, just because of those controls. Anyway, that's it for the cub. I'm going to keep playing Steam Next Fest demos and other demos, and I'm just going to keep talking about them. Thanks very much. This video will continue. Okay, so the next demo I've just finished playing is Mask of the Rose. Now, anyone who's familiar with our video from January, where myself, Moody, and Sadie all talked about the games that we were most excited for in 2022, might remember that Mask of the Rose was legitimately, like, after Hollow Knight, Silksong, and Elden Ring, the game that I was most looking forward to this year. And there's been a demo out for a while, and now I've just taken the opportunity to actually sit down and play it. And I'm so glad that I did. I mean, I was going to play this game anyway. So Mask of the Rose is set in the Fallen London universe, which is like a universe of games by developer Failbear Games. And this universe consists of Fallen London, which is an online text-based adventure game, I think. I've never actually played it. And also Sunless Sea and Sunless Skies, which are two fantastic games that I would put in my top games of the last decade list, like easily. Like, I love those games. And the things that I love most about Sunless Sea and Sunless Skies are the writing, the lore, the world building, the characters, and just the weirdness of the setting. And Mask of the Rose is a visual novel dating sim set in that universe. So by virtue of it being a visual novel, the writing, the lore, the characters, and the weirdness of the setting are drawn into focus in Mask of the Rose. And the fact that on top of like that, it being a visual novel, it's also a dating sim is just mwah. I'm chef's kissing. You can't see me, but mwah. It's just delicious. What's really interesting to me as a fan of the setting and the games that have come before is that Mask of the Rose takes place only 230 days after London fell like from, I guess, the surface of the world into like some weird underground cave. Like, that's the premise of all of the games. That's why it's called Fallen London. And they fall into like this Lovecraftian nightmare, which it's like a horror setting, but like cozy horror. Like Mask of the Rose specifically gives me cozy vibes, despite the fact that it's a game where there's a tentacle in the basement of the boarding house that your character calls home that occasionally steals cider and just all sorts of weird fiction horror stuff. Like, it's difficult to describe, especially without having written stuff down, but like the Fallen London, Sunless Sea, Sunless Skies writing is just so incredibly well done. And it's the same here as well. So the demo gives a good taste of the characters and the writing, which are as excellent as they were in previous games. Like, I loved every minute of my hour or so that I got to spend with Mask of the Rose. And honestly, I was a little bit annoyed when the demo was over because I just wanted to keep clicking through and play it. Like, if I had had the option, I probably would have just sat and played the entire game through the night into the next morning until I was done with it. And the good thing about the final game is it's going to be replayable to like a huge degree. And I just looked at the Steam Store description because I want to talk about something that I didn't experience in the demo, but something that's going to be in the final game. So I'm just going to read this paragraph here, which says, use an elaborate dynamic story crafting system to create love stories and murder theories. Are the twists in the tale not to your tastes? Then you can change the motive, the location, and even the victim and see how the stories adapt. And that just sounds fucking incredible. Like, it's a visual novel and it's a dating sim. There is like a murder mystery involved, which, because this is the Fallen London universe, like later on the murder victim actually comes back to life and helps you try to solve his own murder. And at the beginning of the game as well, like, you're specifically outright asked like what kind of relationships you're looking to build in Mask of the Rose, whether that be based on attraction, based on romance, based on both, or just based on friendship. And I just think these are really cool touches, and I really appreciated them. Like I say, there's not too much more to talk about. There are some mild gameplay elements, like you can equip your character with like hats, wigs, jackets, boots, face masks, and they'll actually, these items that you equip will change the appearance of your character, but will also unlock different dialogue options during conversations, which is kind of cool because you get a vague sense of the types of dialogue options that each item will unlock. But it's not explicitly stated. And when you're talking to characters and you've got your dialogue choices up on the screen in front of you, you'll see like a little clothing item icon next to certain potential responses that let you know that you can only pick these responses because of something that you're wearing. Basically, I played this demo just to see what the writing quality was going to be like, even though I knew it was going to be really, really high. The game has an excellent sense of humor. The lore is great. The world is twisted. The characters are fantastic. And I can't wait to play the rest of the game. I'm so looking forward to it. It's coming. It's due to be released October, November 2022. I'm going to be right there on day one, and I'm going to be obsessed with this game. So I'm just warning you right now. That's going to do it for me talking about Mask of the Rose, and I'm going to go and play another game. So I'll see you in like two seconds. So the next game demo I played is for a game called U-Circuit Parking, and yes, I do. Thank you, game, for pointing that out. This is a racing, driving, parkour, arcade, cute 3D game according to Steam's tags, and I feel like all of those tags are appropriate. You drive cars around absolutely ridiculous courses, and your aim is to park in the parking spaces. And you can see from the footage that I've put up while I'm talking about this that like they very quickly, like, it starts off pretty standard, sort of like, oh, you just drive around some roads and park on some cars. And then the game starts adding obstacles and all sorts of weird, wonderful, ridiculous mechanics. The magnets, the fans, the hammers, the firewalls that'll blow you up if you touch them. And you've just got to put all this stuff together and park. And you also can't stop. I feel like it's definitely worth me pointing out that you have to keep going no matter what. As soon as you stop, that's classed as parking, and if you haven't stopped in the right place, then that is you parked in the wrong place. It's as simple as that. Honestly, there's not really too much I can say about this game. Like the challenge ramps up quite deviously and very quickly. I think I was only on my fourth set of levels before I was hitting challenges that I was looking at going, damn, this is going to take some actual like skill to actually accomplish. And it's very fast paced. It's very snappy. Like you just keep going and going and going and going and going. Eventually, you'll run out of time on a level. And you just restart the level and go again with everything that you have learned from your previous attempts at parking, which you suck at. Then the game knows this, and that's why it's called what it's called. It's quite addictive, though. Like the four sets of levels that I played through as part of this demo are pretty addictive. I'm also noticing from the Steam Store page that the game is going to have multiplayer, which sounds ridiculous. That sounds like it'll be crazy. I'd love to get a ton of people into a lobby and just go nuts with this game. Like, it's actually a pretty challenging, pretty addictive car driving puzzle game, but also like it's going to be sold on the absurdity of the tracks and the ways in which you can crash and explode and generally fail at the game. And it's going to be a lot of chaos, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I had fun with it. And there's not much more I can say about that. It's simple to pick up, yet difficult to master. That's a saying, right? So that's probably where I land with U-Circuit Parking. It's really fun. Give it a try. You might enjoy it. I certainly did. On to the next one. So the next demo I've played is for a game called Terra Nil, which builds itself as a reverse city builder, and it's a very, very cool and interesting concept, especially for somebody like me who's like interested in the environment and I'd consider myself an environmentalist, because what you do in Terra Nil is you go to a barren wasteland and then you turn it into like an ecological paradise, as the game calls it. You bring back plant life to the wasteland. Like you scrub it clean and then get the greenery going, and then you start building up different biomes, and then from there you start reintroducing fauna and flora into the environment, basically reclaiming like a wasteland fucked up by assumedly like climate change. I have to say. And then you just build it back up and back up and back up until eventually it's like a ecological paradise. You know, as the Steam store description says, like you begin with a water system, you purify the soil, you cultivate greenery, and then you start doing more ambitious stuff. You restore biodiversity, fix the climate, introduce wildlife, and then you recycle all of the structures and leave the environment pristine. And then you move on to the next environment, and then you do it again. Playing the demo, it's a really chill, cool, calm experience. Like, it's very chill atmosphere, very chill music, and it's nice to just start off with this like brown blasted wasteland and then slowly turn it into something beautiful. But it also requires a lot of forward planning. Like, you've actually got to think about where you put the buildings that you're going to put down, and where you put X, Y, and Z. Like, where the water goes, where the windmills go, where the soil reclamators go, where the I can't remember what the buildings are called that like brings all the greenery back to life. Like, you can accidentally screw yourself because you have to manage like almost like a currency type thing, where it's like things will cost a certain amount of leafs in this game's currency to place down, and you can earn leafs by clever placement of things like beehives or those buildings that I talked about before that make everything green. Like, they let you bank up currency that you can spend on other things like windmills to generate power, or calcifiers to generate rocks to put the windmills on. And like, there's this thing you can use to like generate ash and like soil to put other buildings on to like build things back up again, which requires you to set fire. And I might have accidentally placed it in the wrong place and burned almost the entire map to the ground. I definitely learned from my mistakes on that one. So yeah, like, despite its chill nature, you actually have to put some thought into where you're gonna put different buildings and like how to manage the resources. Like, you've got to maximize the amount of return on the currency, the greenery stuff, so that you can spend it wisely. And you've got to sort of balance the two things, and like slowly reclaim everything. It's really cool, and it's really chill, and like I definitely want to in the trailer there's like whales and frogs and birds. Like, you've got an entire aviary, and like there's different environments, like tropical environments and winter environments, and like I definitely am interested to like take this game to the next level, pun intended, and like see where it all goes, and reclaim all of these different wastelands, and just be prepared that you actually have to put a lot of thought into like how you're putting your buildings down and where you're putting them, and for the love of all things nature, don't accidentally burn your entire map to the ground. Learn from my mistake. My map suffered so that yours doesn't have to. So I just finished playing my first horror game of Steam Next Fest, and that was The Fridge is Red, which is a first-person anthology-based, or maybe just episodic-based horror game. Its big thing is it is done in the style of like PlayStation 1 graphics, so it's very unsettling just from the art style, because like I've always found that lo-fi graphics and pixel graphics like lend themselves quite well to horror, because you have to fill in a lot of the blanks yourself, right? Like, it's very unreal in a way that like aiming for like true graphical fidelity in a horror game sometimes isn't, although that can be horrifying in a completely different way. But the demo for The Fridge is Red came with 2 episodes. In the first episode, you are stuck motionless and the red fridge is in front of you, and you have to find some stuff. But every time you look away from the fridge, it's kind of getting closer. Every time you look away, and that's the entirety of the first episode that I played. The second episode that I played was more of an adventure horror style. You're leaving. You wake up at it's like 11 p.m. You fall asleep in your office, and as you're leaving, you get in the elevator, and horror begins, and you start exploring liminal space. Is probably the best way to describe it. As you on this descent into, I don't know, hell might be an accurate description. It's pretty unsettling. Like, it doesn't ever really go for like the big jump scares, like it could very easily at certain points. The Fridge is Red is very much trying to build an unsettling vibe. Like, it's trying to make you feel uneasy. And there are definitely moments of like, panic where things are happening very quickly and you need to sort of figure stuff out. And combining like those two different styles with the PS1 era aesthetic is it creates a really creepy game. Like not necessarily terrifying or like overly scary, but just creepy. It's pretty unsettling to just wander through the parts of the game that I played. And I think that's what they were going for, and they succeeded. The Fridge is Red doesn't just borrow the aesthetic of the PlayStation 1 era, though, it also borrows the esoteric nature of the puzzle. So if you ever played, especially I think like old Silent Hill, like the original Silent Hill games on PS1 and PS2, like sometimes the puzzle solutions could be frustratingly obtuse. And there's a couple of puzzles in The Fridge is Red that are like that, not to the degree of like say the piano puzzle from the original Silent Hill, but there's definitely a couple of puzzle solutions that had me sort of scratching my head for a little while. And yeah, that's it for my thoughts, for my quick fire thoughts on The Fridge is Red. I'm going to be playing tons more demos throughout the rest of today. Not that today matters to you, I guess, but that's what I'm doing. And I'm gonna play the demo and capture the footage, and then immediately record my unscripted raw thoughts on each demo. Like I'm just reminding you partway through this video, I guess. But I'm gonna keep going. I feel like I need some action now. I feel like I need some to get the adrenaline back. I keep trying to end these segments like they're each in their individual videos just out of reflex, and they're not. Like this is one continuous video. Apologies for that, I guess. Here's the next one. Okay, so this one's actually going to be a really easy sell. Did you play and enjoy GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64? Because if the answer is yes, have I got the game for you? It's this game. The one I just played a demo of. Agent 64 Spies Never Die. It's a retro first-person shooter, and it says it's inspired by classic 90s console shooters, but it's actually inspired by one classic 90s console shooter, which is GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64. Like, this game feels and looks and plays like a modern reimagining of GoldenEye. Everything from the way the weapons work to the way the AI behaves, like to the forward rolls that some of the enemies will do towards you when you walk around a corner, like from the biggest stuff to the smaller stuff. But it feels modernized in a way that it's very smooth to play. Like the frame rate is incredibly smooth. It's not janky in any way. And it's just got so many cool little touches. I actually played this demo 3 times. It took me about 7 or 8 minutes to finish the level that's included in the demo the first time. And there's actually 3 different difficulty levels. There's like Agent, Special Agent, and Elite Agent, I think are the 3 different difficulty levels. And they do something that classic GoldenEye and Perfect Dark would do, which is when you pump the difficulty up, you do make the game harder for yourself, naturally, but you also add extra objectives that need to be completed in the level. So, for example, changing the difficulty from Agent to Special Agent, or whatever the second level of difficulty is, adds an extra objective that sees you needing to go and rescue some hostages on top of doing everything that you needed to do the first time you played it on the lower difficulty. And like honestly, I was gutted that it was over when I was playing it. Like I could definitely easily play a full game of Agent 64 Spies Never Die. Like I loved GoldenEye back in the day, but the things that I hated about it were how slow it felt and how muddy it was. Like, even in the 90s, when the game was brand new, it just didn't feel great, but it was, like, the best that we had at the time. So, you work with what you've got sometimes, whereas now, playing Agent 64 in 2022, like, it's just really addictive. Like, I could see myself just blasting through this entire game when it comes out, and I had a ton of fun with the demo. I'm super looking forward to more. You should check it out if you get a chance. If you've got a fondness for the 90s or like 90s games, like especially GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, give this a look. It'll take 10 minutes of your life and you'll have a good time. Okay, so the next demo I played is Zell, which I just finished playing. It's an isometric action game, like akin to something like say Death's Door from in terms of like the camera angle and the gameplay style. I only played like I guess the first 30 minutes. You play as a protagonist who's got amnesia and crashes on a planet, and she's got this cute little robot buddy following her around. And you explore the forest, and then you find like factory, I don't know, like some kind of like machinery place, and then robots try to kill you. You find a sword, and it's pretty good. It's I think I pretty much played the first 30 minutes. I think that's what the demo is. And like looking at the trailer, there's a lot of cool, interesting stuff that happens like later in the game. But as far as the first 30 minutes goes, it's pretty basic. Like the game obviously is taking some inspiration from Zelda based on sort of like the gameplay style and also the puzzle solving and the dungeons. And there's a few visual flourishes like the stamina donut, which is very recognizable from Breath of the Wild, as well as like the health system is a series of hearts that go down as you take damage. And it was pretty interesting. I'm not going to say it blew my mind or anything, but like I definitely want to keep an eye out on it. Like the part that I played, the first 30 minutes seemed very simple. Because again, it's the first 30 minutes, right? So like games get more and more complex as you go on. And like looking at the trailer, which I'm watching right now without sound, like it seems like there's a lot of cool, interesting stuff that happens later in the game. But for me, I learned how to dodge. I've got a shield to block, and I got a sword, and I could do basic attacks. The basic enemies that you fight in Zell, at least in the demo, are really easy to cheese. You just run circles around them until they attack, and then hit them in the back, and then they die. There was a boss fight at the end of the demo, which again, like once you figure out what you're supposed to do in terms of dodging, which by the way, I don't think the game ever actually told me I could dodge until I just started pushing loads of buttons and found the dodge button. And the boss fight is fairly basic and fairly easy. Now, again, like I'm approaching this as I'm playing a demo, it's an alpha, so it'll get polished up and whatnot. And of course, like the game will get more complex as time goes on. So what I played was fine. It was a cool sort of foundation, I guess, but I don't know, like because it was just the first 30 minutes of the game, like it's not really putting its like most exciting foot forward, I guess. So while I'm interested to see more of the game and keep an eye on it, it's coming out next month, July 12th. So, it's not that far away from launch. But the demo didn't blow me away. It was nice. It was cool. Like I said, you get the cute little robot buddy. The protagonist has some pretty decent banter. Like she's quite funny in moments. And it's more. I'm more looking at the trailer now and seeing like the promise like of the game that I played in that 30-minute demo, like blown out into a full game. So it's hard for me to judge like what the rest of the game is going to be like based on what I played. Like all I can talk about is the first 30 minutes, and it was fine. And so that's going to do it, because I feel like I'm just going to talk myself around in circles if I keep talking about Zell. So I'm gonna wrap this section of the video up and move on to play another demo right now. Alright, so I just finished playing Angerfoot, which if you've seen the podcast that we put out this week about, my favorite games of, the E3 weekend, then you'll know that I gave a very fake award to Angerfoot for being the best named game of the entire weekend. And honestly, the concept is pretty cool. I said in the podcast, it's like if someone played Deathloop and really enjoyed the kicking mechanic, which is fair because it's a really good mechanic. As a full game, I say a full game, I've played a bit of a demo of Angerfoot. It's a very specific type of game. You got the pulse pounding bass line going through like your skull if you're wearing headphones. Can't speak to what it's like if you're wearing speakers. That's not a thing. And it's very much just short, fast-paced levels in which you kick doors down, and then there's bad guys on the other side, and you've got to kick them to death, or you shoot them to death. You do start getting guns at a later point. And it's just fast and furious. Like, enemies die in one hit. You die in a couple of hits. And it's quite funny. Like, I was getting absolutely shredded to pieces trying to play this game the way I thought the game wanted to be played, which was just charging forward, going as fast as possible, trying to shoot and kick everybody to death. And then when I actually slowed down just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit, I actually started having more success. It's a very fast-paced action game that almost needs to be approached as a puzzle game. Like each room containing enemies is almost like a puzzle that you have to solve to get through it, and it's a very fast-paced puzzle. It requires a lot of very quick reactions and very quick thinking, and the chaos level is just dialed all the way up to 11. Like this footage, I don't know what part of the footage I'm going to put in here, but there's plenty of bits of the footage where you're probably watching it going, what the fuck is happening? I have no idea what's happening on the screen right now, and I'm going to tell you, dear viewer and dear listener, that there were points in this game where I did not know what was happening, but I wasn't dead yet, so therefore it was probably going quite well. It's got that very trademark, and I don't think it's a trademark Devolver Digital sense of humor, but it's very reminiscent of Devolver Digital's sense of humor. It's a really silly game, but funny in its silliness, and not silly in its silliness. I mean, the basic concept is you're going around kicking the shit out of gangsters or like a gang. I'm pretty sure there's a gang involved at some point, and you're kicking the crap out of them. And then there's like a level partway through where you find out what your motivation is, and it's because the gang leader has stolen one of your trainers called Arthur, and it's like such a big deal that you go and you just start killing everybody. The character's name is also Angerfoot, by the way. It's a really stupid game, and it's designed to make you laugh as opposed to necessarily even think. And honestly, sometimes I think thinking might get in the way, especially in the gameplay segments. And it's fun. Like it's not trying to be anything more than that. Like the controls are fine. Like it's exactly what you'd expect. The pacing is like a boomer shooter pace, like a very fast paced sort of like Doom style like pacing to the first person shooting. You know, you pick up guns off of dead enemies, and when they're empty, you throw them at them to stun them, and then you kick them to death, and then you just take their gun. It's very similar to sort of, I would imagine, like a first person Hotline Miami that's taking itself like entirely not as seriously as Hotline Miami, and it was pretty fun for the sort of 20-30 minutes that I played it. Angerfoot, great name for a game, even funnier name for a character. I'm gonna go now and play some more video games, because video games, you know what? Pretty cool. They're pretty cool. Okay, so SCP Secret Files is going to be a bit of a weird one to talk about. So I'm going to talk about what SCP is for anyone that doesn't actually know what it is, and then I'll talk about the demo before then talking about what the game might actually be going forward. So the SCP Foundation, for people that don't know, is like it's like a wiki, like a fan-edited wiki, of just weird and strange stuff. Like SCPs like cover like such a huge and wide variety of different types of things, but generally they're like weird objects or events or just things in general that are contained by this secret government agency. If you've ever played Control, the oldest house, like the organization that lives in the oldest house and keeps like the fridge and the traffic lights and stuff, that was heavily inspired by the SCP Foundation. And the demo that I just played of SCP Secret Files is very much it's very much one chapter of what will be the eventual full game. So the chapter that I played had to do with SCP-701, and I'm not going to say what SCP-701 is for people that don't know. The demo that I played was very much a psychological horror game. It's about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how long it takes you to solve a couple of puzzles that are fairly simple but quite precise. But other than that, you in the demo you're playing as someone called Bella, who's a researcher for the SCP Foundation, who goes to an SCP site called Pony Station, which is dropped out of context, and you have to go there to recover the black box and figure out what actually happened to the people who were there working on SCP-701. And Bella doesn't actually know what SCP-701 is, at least not at the start of the demo. She definitely knows what it is by the end of the demo. And it's, it's a very cool, competent, very creepy, atmospheric horror game chapter thing. The SCP series in video game form has generally been defined by its horror games. There's been some excellent horror themed video games made out of certain SCP files, like SCP Containment Breach, which brought together a bunch of different SCPs into one game, which was basically like a survival horror. There's been other smaller experiences, like the SCP, I forget the name of it, where you're walking down the stairs. That was quite big a few years ago. But because of the proclivity of horror games based on SCP wiki entries, I think a lot of people think that the SCP Foundation, is purely focused on horror, like all different kinds of horror. It's essentially a giant wiki of weird fiction, sure, and there are a lot of really like sinister horror-driven entries there, but the SCP Foundation has a wide variety of different types of stories saved to it. And that's where I want to get into talking less about the demo that I played, which was good. It was a really good psychological horror that was creepy in parts. It made me jump in all the right parts, and I was generally unsettled as I played it and interested to learn more about what happened at Pony Station. But Secret Files, the game that is being made, like the rest of the game, is an anthology series based on a bunch of different SCPs, and not all of them, judging by the trailer, by the Steam store page, are actually going to be horror related. It's like the developers of SCP Secret Files have actually understand that there's a bunch of different genres that you can find in the SCP Foundation. Like, there's going to be a bunch of different stories, each with their own tone and their different mechanics. Like, there's a retro adventure chapter, there's an interactive fiction chapter, there's an interactive storybook chapter, and not all of them are going to be horror in tone, and that makes sense because the SCP Foundation wiki has a lot of different stories. Some of them are comedies, some of them are tragedies, some of them are indeed horrors, and then it's going to bring all of these things together. And as someone who is a fan of the SCP Foundation wiki, and has just played the demo for Secret Files, which is very much a pretty well put together horror game, like, I'm genuinely excited to explore a bunch of different tones and gameplay mechanics, like, beyond just the horror. Like, the horror is good, don't get me wrong. I love a good horror game. I'm very excited to experience other types of SCP stories, not just the scary ones. Because, like, there's so much creativity at the SCP Foundation wiki, and, like, a game developer who is creating a game such as this with different chapters focusing on all sorts of different SCP stories, like, there's a lot of room for some really awesome creativity. And I can't wait to see that creativity come to life. And the SCP-701 story that I just experienced as part of the Secret Files demo was really well done. So I'm excited for the game that I didn't know existed until Steam Next Fest started. And that's it. Like, it was a good demo, but I thought it was more appropriate to give you sort of more of an overview of the actual full game, because it's not just going to be a horror game, it's going to be all sorts of different types of games, and I can't wait to see how it's put together and see what kind of SCP stories SCP Secret Files will tell. And now that I've said the initials SCP about 100 times, I'm going to go move on and play another game. Okay, so I just finished the demo for the Wandering Village, which, you know, despite the fact that I played it for an hour, I'm not sure I have all that much to say about it. That's not necessarily to say the demo was bad, it was actually quite pleasant. The Wandering Village takes place on a world which has been poisoned by toxic spores and contaminated the entire planet, and there's small pockets of survivors, and it's a village building simulator, with the twist being that you're building the village on the back of this giant creature called Onbu. And so you try to form like a symbiotic relationship with this big creature where you are building rebuilding your civilization on top of his back, and he keeps you relatively safe. You know, there's resources on his back, and as he's wandering through the world, you know, you'll eventually be able to send out parties like scavenging parties to go out and scavenge even more resources from the surrounding area. And because Onbu is always moving, you always have access to new and different types of resources. And it's pretty cool. Like, as a village builder, it's fairly standard. You know, you build all of the buildings that you would think that you would need to build, you know, like places for your villagers to live, places for you to farm food, catch water, harvest resources such as stone and wood that you can turn into buildings later on. You've got a research center to research new buildings and all this other new stuff. You also need to like build buildings to help Onbu, so like you can build a trebuchet to fire food from his back into his mouth. It's quite cute, actually. And it was like mostly a chill time, you know, just like managing various resources, and the number of resources that you manage grows as you research new stuff. Like, it's at first it's just berries and wood and stone, and then that becomes beets that you can farm, and wheat to make flour, to make bread, and iron ore, sand to make glass, and just all sorts of stuff. And as Onbu is wandering through the world, you can take a look at like the world map to see like what's coming up. So like sometimes you might find something that's really helpful, such as feeding spots for Onbu to actually eat at without having to feed them. And other times, you know, there might be like environmental hazards, such as like, say, like a cold spot almost, that will like slow down the production of your plants. So toxic spore clouds that will create poisonous plants that you have to deal with on Onbu's back. And the wandering creature aspect of the game is actually very interesting, because it creates almost like, you know, those paths that you choose to go down in something like Slay the Spire, where it's like, you know, you have a randomized path before you, and you choose which way you want to go and what kind of encounters you have. It kind of feels a little bit like that, where it's like, you know, you reach crossroads at a certain point in the game, and in the early game, you can't actually choose which way Onbu goes. Onbu goes wherever Onbu wants to go, and that's absolutely fine. So you have to kind of plan around which way Onbu is going, but later you're able to sort of influence which way Onbu will go at crossroads and choose different paths. It's also very cozy and it's very chill. The music is very almost dreamlike, and it's designed, I think, to just to make you relax and be relaxing, while also having the fate of, Ombu and all of the villages in your hands. Like, it was a cool demo. It's got me interested to keep track of it and maybe play it at some point in the future. So I'm gonna keep playing demos. I'm not done yet. Still want to play some more demos. This is turning into a bit of a Dear Diary situation, which is quite interesting. I've never made a video like this before. It's quite fun though. Like, I'm enjoying it. But anyway, on with the demos. So Frogun, I think that's how it's pronounced. It might be Frogun. I don't know. You play a kid who is looking for her parents. Her parents are archaeologists. They left her behind at camp when they went to explore some ruins a couple of days earlier, and now Renata, which is the name of the kid, has gone looking for them because she's worried about them, and she has a frog gun, which is her friend, and also a grappling hook. I guess you could kind of say that's the mechanic that's being used, and it's very cute. It's an old school platformer in the style of like stuff you would find on like the 3D stuff from like PS1 and N64 era. So if you think sort of like Mario 64 type stuff, Donkey Kong, that kind of era, like the aesthetics, the gameplay style, the charm, like it also like Frogun also manages to replicate the charm of like those old school platformers, and also the absolute rage, because like, I don't know about you, but when I used to play at PlayStation and like N64 platformers, like they infuriated me, but I also like had to beat them. Like it was that like, I'm not gonna let this challenge beat me because I can see what I need to do, and I just need to do what I need to do. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's like getting my thumbs to actually do the thing that the 3D platformer wants me to do. I'm sure that all made perfect sense. But anyway, Frogun, it's a fun game. Like, I played about 6 levels, give or take. And they started off fairly simple, just like lulling me into a false sense of security, as in, you can do this really easily. And then like quickly, I'd like veer off and onto a side path to find like an obsidian crystal. There's like tons of secrets hidden in each level. And then I'd be confronted with a puzzle that would just kill me over and over again. Frogun, it's a fun game. I don't really have that much to say about it, so I'm just going to cut it off right there and just say, if you like old school 3D platformers with a lot of charm and that quite cute and like brings back that aesthetic as well, but will also like enrage you if those kind of games used to enrage you like they did with me, give it a look. Frogun, it's a fun game. So if you've made it this far into the video, wow, I don't know whether this video is actually really useful for people who want to know about some games that are coming out and some demos that are available on Steam, or if it's just rambling nonsense. Like, I always feel like most of my videos are rambling nonsense, but there are people that watch them and say that they're useful, so I just choose to believe them over my own brain. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. The reason why I mention if you've made it this far in this video, because you found probably my favorite demo of Steam Next Fest, at least so far. I just finished playing Signalis for about half an hour. And my one word to sum it up would be, wow, but without the question mark at the end. I don't know why I inflected it like that. Signalis is a classic survival horror game. Like, it's taking you can easily see it's taking inspiration from classic games of the genre, such as the original Resident Evil trilogy on PlayStation, or the older Silent Hill games on PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, done from a top-down perspective, as opposed to like the perspectives of those games that it's been inspired by. But instead of being about zombies or focused on monsters, at least in the demo, it's very much more of a creepy, spooky game, not necessarily an overtly scary game, as you explore in the demo a crashed spaceship that you wake up on, try to figure out what's going on. Like, there are monsters that you do come across. Like, there's an incredibly like clever artistic decision to have the monsters be almost like bathed in shadow, so you get like shapes of them, but you can't ever really see what they are or what they look like, and that's just so much creepier than being able to see like every detail of a monster, right? Because your brain has to sort of fill in the blanks almost, and that is just, my brain can scare me a lot better than like a detailed model of a monster. There's also some cosmic horror vibes going on. Like, in the game itself, in the demo, you can actually find a book, and that book is The King in Yellow, which was a collection of short stories that was published in 1895. It's incredibly surreal, and it was served as one of the inspirations for H.P. Lovecraft when he was creating the eldritch horrors of that defined his fiction. There's also definitely like a heavy alien inspiration to this game, like not necessarily in terms of the tone of the monsters or the survival, but in terms of like just the mood and the atmosphere, like the beeps and the general like how the spaceship like feels to explore. And that's pretty cool. I love aliens, so that's awesome. But in terms of like the gameplay, it's very much exploring and scavenging like items, weapons, ammo, repair kits, and like key items you need to progress. Solving a few puzzles. There's a couple of cool puzzles in here that generally revolve around finding hints as to how to solve them somewhere in the environment and then putting those hints into practice to actually solve the puzzles. I actually brute forced one of the puzzles by accident because I didn't search a different part of the ship to find the note that would have helped me solve it. So I just kind of did it. And you explore in this top-down perspective, like I mentioned before, but there are certain rooms in the game where you will have a perspective shift and you will explore these rooms in first person, almost like a classic adventure game where it's like you have the first person perspective and you can click on different areas of the room that you're in to like focus in on them and then maybe examine like a control panel or pick up a photograph or like just generally like explore in that way as well. So it's a nice mixture of the two. Signalis has been on my mind since it was at the Tribeca Game Spotlight in 2021. Like, all of the games at that Spotlight were on my mind because they all looked really, really cool. And it took some finding to find this demo, I want to say. Like, I had to scroll quite deep into the Steam Next Fest list of demos before I found Signalis, and then I immediately installed it. And I'm glad I did, because this is definitely my favorite of the demos that I played. Like, I love the atmosphere. I love the creepiness of the world, not necessarily the over the top horror. And the gameplay was cool once I got to grips with it. I just love the vibes, man. I just love the vibes. Like, the game's coming out on October 27th and is going to be available on PC and also Xbox, and it's going to be in Game Pass. So I can't wait to download this day one from Game Pass and just demolish it, because what I played in these 30 minutes is really, really cool. Anyway, I'm going to keep playing because I got a couple more demos that I want to try and get through before I decide to cut it off arbitrarily and publish this video. Kind of annoyed with myself that Signalis is so far into the video, because it's definitely my favorite demo so far. How's this for Tonal Whiplash? So the next demo that I just finished playing was for Monster Prom 3 Monster Road Trip, which is a comedy visual novel with a multiplayer it's built around multiplayer. And honestly, like, it almost feels pointless me actually playing the demo for Monster Prom 3, because, like, I've been a huge fan of Monster Prom since the game came out, since before the game came out, when me and Keith first heard about it. Like, and I know I'm already in for Monster Prom 3. Like, the original Monster Prom was a game we played a ton of when it first came out, and it's the only game that's ever made me laugh so much, like, on live stream when we were streaming it. Like, Keith picked an option that set off a chain of events that made me laugh so hard I fell out of my chair. So, like, Monster Prom 3, the Monster Prom series, it just gets me. Like, it's exactly my kind of humor. Monster Prom 3 changes things up quite dramatically from the mechanics of Monster Prom and Monster Prom 2, in that it's not really a dating sim anymore, but more it's a narrative survival adventure, with a focus on my two absolute favorite characters from Monster Prom, Polly and Scott. I love those two characters so much, and I'm so happy that they're getting the focus of their own game. But there's a lot of twists to the mechanics in Monster Prom 3 that you might not necessarily see coming having played the first two games. So Monster Prom 3 is a monster road trip. It's a road trip. You and your friends, like, if you play multiplayer, go on a road trip with Scott and Polly. And basically the whole thing takes place on a map where you choose one of two different locations at every like sort of crossroads, except I guess it's not really a crossroads if you're only picking two locations, I guess. But anyway, like, you pick a location and then you pick something, and then, like, you get a choice of three things that you can do at that location, and depending on what you pick will depend on, like, a scene that plays out. And the goal of this game isn't to get a date, although you can get a date with either Scott or Polly or with one of the other characters that you can pick up as hitchhikers. And one of the other biggest twists to this game is that it's more cooperative than the previous games, whereas before, like, you could battle each other almost to try and, like, get the date that you want to get, whereas this, it changes the mechanics fundamentally to the point where like the stats that you have for like stamina and money and soul and hype and all of that stuff are shared between all of the players. So you have to work together to make sure that none of these stats run out, because if one stat hits 0, then the trip is over, the run is done, and you have to go back to the beginning. And there is a competitive aspect which is explained by the pit stops, but those mechanics haven't necessarily been implemented in the game yet, as the game itself explains. So I don't really want to explain too much about them, because like it's not actually something that I played in the demo. But some of the mechanics that the game explains can happen like between the choices like that you make at this pit stop after every 4 locations that you visit, like, sounds seriously cool. Like, this whole game sounds seriously cool, but even the part that I played, it was fucking hilarious, man. Monster Prom's trademark humor is here, it's intact. Most of the scenes that I played, like, and the choices that I made just had me cackling, like, so much. Like, I love the humor, the sense of humor that Monster Prom has. It's right here. It's right in Monster Prom 3 Road Trip. And I just can't wait to grab like Keith and other people who want to play this game and just have a fantastic time playing this game over and over again. Check out the demo if you want to see what the vibes are of this game, and if you want to have a great laugh. And I'm going to play another demo. So onward, forward. For some reason I just hit record and then shoved a massive piece of brownie in my mouth. Tastes good though. So I'm ending things here in this video with the last demo that I played, which was Naiad. And a Naiad, for anyone that doesn't know, is a nymph from classical mythology that lives in or gives life to things like lakes, rivers, springs, and fountains and that sort of thing. And that's very much the vibe of the game Naiad that I just played a 30-minute demo of. So in the game, you play as a Naiad. He was just flowing down a river, and it's just a very minimalist sort of game. Like it's a very beautiful game for starters. Like, it's all immersed in nature, and you just like there's a point in the game where you talk to a cloud, and the cloud talks about like your movements and like how you can chain together your movements just to create like beauty in nature, and I really love that. Like, it was such a soothing experience playing this demo. Essentially, you're exploring the river, and there's a bunch of different chapters that take place in different sort of locations. Like, you go on the river, you go to a spring, you go to some caves. You meet a lot of cool animal friends along the way, ducks, frogs, and bears. And you can sing and use that singing to interact with the environment or with like the fauna and the flora. You can get fish to follow you by singing. If you use your dash mechanic, you can swim like a frog and then get frogs to follow you. It's just a generally like beautiful and emotive and evocative experience. Or at least it was for the first 30 minutes that I played the demo. And there's secrets to find, and there's stuff that you can do in the demo. Like, you're not just like swimming around in a river and finding all the cute friends, or just making cool patterns in the water, or just relaxing in sunlight. Although you can just do all those things if you want. But there are things to do, and the game never points you directly towards them. Like, the first thing, air quotes, that I came across was like a flute in the water. And there was someone I found. Sorry, there's a fly. Hold on. Stupid thing. I love how I'm just talking about like being one with nature and then swatting a fly away from me while I'm trying to record. So yeah, you find this flute floating in the water, and there's someone sitting on the bank, and if you push the flute towards them, they'll pick it up. And if you start singing, they'll start playing a flute. And it's just a really nice, genuine, cool, wholesome moment within the game. And there's tons of little things like this. Like, you can, if you experiment with the interactions you can do within the environment, you will do things mostly centered around protecting or giving life to the water, to the lake, to nature surrounding it. And honestly, it was just a very relaxing experience. Like, it was a nice sort of soul cleanser for me at the end of this very long couple of days where I've gone through all sorts of different types of gaming experience. I feel like Naiad was the perfect like place for me to sort of end like this run of playing demos. It's a genuinely nice experience, and I'm all for like games just being nice And honestly, like in Naiad, the Naiad in Naiad is probably living like my best life. Like if I could just be like a water nymph, just floating around in the river, helping out my animal friends and bringing life to nature, like I think I genuinely would choose that life for myself. So it's nice to be able to experience it in the form of a video game, especially with the incredible graphics and visual style that is part of this game. So that's it for this video. 15 game demos, either as a part of Steam Next Fest or just generally on Steam, that were in my demos folder. And it's been a really, really cool, awesome experience to just try out 15 very different games. Like, we started with a heavy metal first person shooter to the beat of this adrenaline fueling, pulse pounding heavy metal, and then we ended as a naiad floating down a river in a totally chill sort of adventure game. And we hit a bunch of different types of games in between. There are tons of demos available at Steam Next Fest, including these 15. They're all available until June 20th, so plenty of time to check out these demos, or if you just want to go scrolling through Steam Next Fest and find some demos for yourself. And if you find something that I didn't play and they want to talk about it, hit me up in the comments below, hit me up on Twitter. If you play one of these demos and you want to tell me all about your experience, do the same thing. Honestly, I love talking about cool indie games. I just do, like, it's a passion of mine, and that's one of the reasons why I do this. But if you like the look of any of these games, go and wishlist them on Steam. Keep an eye out for them coming out. I'm going to link all of the Steam store pages for all 15 games that I played below. Go show the devs some love. Like, they've made some really cool, unique, awesome experiences that I'm glad I got to check out this week. I'm going to get out of here and play more games. So, thank you very much for watching this video. I have no idea how long it is or how it turned out. I haven't edited it together yet. I'm about to do that now. I hope you found this video useful. Or entertaining or informative. At least one of those three things. All three would be nice, but at least one of those three things. So I'm gonna go. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you all later.